again, thank you for going through my e-portfolio. And with this part, I kind of just want to talk through a presentation I gave as part of a class that I took my spring semester junior year. And that was Management Science 45, Process Improvement. And it was a really cool project that I got to be a part of because we got to actually work in conjunction with a company, an actual real living company, and kind of actually help them improve their process. And as you can see, the company we worked with was Mission Lexington, and it's kind of the local version of Goodwill to Lexington, South Carolina, which is just outside Columbia. So 1 2 of a drive. But basically, with this presentation, I kind of just want to walk through it and kind of relive going through the presentation on the day that we gave it to their board of directors, and kind of talk about how each part relates to the DMAIC cycle, which is kind of the framework of any process improvement project. If you've read my e-portfolio, you know that the DMAIC cycle, each letter stands for a specific part of the process, which is define, measure, analyze, improve, and control DMAIC. So basically, it is an all-encompassing term that kind of works through an entire project, which is very helpful, especially when you're just getting started. So to begin with, just an introduction slide. So this is where we kind of jump into the define phase. Process map is basically just a very high level look at how a process works for a company. Like where do you receive some? For this in particular, obviously they work on donations. So where they receive a donation, where they determine where it goes, where they tag it, where they price, and when it's moved to the store. So this is just a very helpful define tool in process improvement. This is another very helpful define tool, SIPOC analysis. This is kind of just where it lays out all these specific suppliers, inputs, processes, outputs, and customers for the process. These tools are really just used for the actual consulting person or for the team that's doing the project, not really for the company they're doing it for. It's kind of to help them understand the process a little better in more detail, because if you don't understand the process in very high level detail, how can you be expected to improve, analyze, and then improve upon that process? This looks like it was just a workflow, so it just kind of shows where those items are received, where they go once they are received, and how they work their way to that shop floor. And this is just another layout of the process map, but for a specific tool we use called process model. And it's just kind of, it's the same thing, but in a little more detail. And if you run the software program, it'll give you certain things like utilization rate and the throughput rate as well. So this is kind of when we move into the measure phase of the process, and that's really when you get down into the nitty-gritty details of the data that we collect and how we can use that data. So these are just some different numbers, as you can see, that we collected. This is just the assumptions for that data, which are always important when you're doing analysis on a data set, that you need to understand what it's assuming, because if you don't, it can be very misleading. This is showing how we collected the data, which, if I remember correctly, it was just we sat there, I think it was 2 or 3 days, and watched their process for an entire shift. And it was brutal, but we got a lot of really good information out of it. And again, like I said, really everything from the define and measure stage of the process isn't very helpful for the actual company like Mission Lexington in this sense, because this is all stuff that they kind of already know as a company. And this is more so for our use so that we can better help them. And this is just a layout of the data that we collected, it looks like, and how we collected it. And this is when we move into the analyze stage of the project. And this is kind of where we take that data set and we do some analysis on it and kind of get those numbers that are a little more useful to them. And as you can see, we calculated utilization rate. And that number really is just helpful to understand who is helping, what parts of your process are being most utilized and what parts of your process are being underutilized. And in this sense, it looks like the unloader had the highest utilization rate. And just for clarity purposes, utilization rate, obviously, you want it to be high. That means that the person or the machine or whatever is doing that process is working 24 like during the entire process, and they don't have a lot of downtime. So in this sense, the unloader is being very highly utilized, but these clothes hanger individuals are not at a 21.41%. Just a little more analysis it looks like that we did just as far as it looks like how utilized the different items were through the process. So it looks like toys and furniture were pretty highly utilized as far as going through in a throughput sense. And again, this looks like it's more revenue driven, like as far as where Mission Lexington gets the majority of their money. And I think we kind of talked about in the project that it's assumed to be clothing because that's the majority of their stock, and what people need the most is clothing, and what their customers end up coming in for. But it looks like, looking at this, that houseware is actually the highest as far as total revenue, and you can see with that 6.8% of their total revenue, or discounts, I should say. That would just be how much they're discounting for those customers, I guess. But I think with this, we were just trying to tell them, like, hey, you might think clothing's your big ticket item, but it's actually furniture and houseware. So just kind of putting those in the forefront of their minds so that we could talk about what we want to change later on. And then this is another analytical tool, failure mode and effective analysis. This is kind of just used to understand where problems can arise in their process and what we can do to fix those problems. So just to kind of give a quick understanding of this, it's not as complicated as it looks. These are just description items for the most part. This would just be where in the process it is, what the failure is, and what the failure will cause. This is how severe the failure would be on a scale of 1 to 10. This would be what causes the failure, and this would be how often it occurs on a scale of 1 to 10, how it's currently controlled, how easy it is for them to detect on a scale of 1 to 10, and then this RPN number is really just used to kind of highlight what problems are their real problems and what problems aren't. And it's just these three numbers multiplied by each other. And this number, like if you look through this list, there's only like 3 or 4 numbers that are, or I should say 2 or 3 numbers that really are higher than the rest. And that just shows these are the things you should focus on and not these other problems that we talked to you about. And as you can see, we recommended acting on only 2 of them because those RPNs were higher than all the rest pretty significantly. And then this looks like it's just a Pareto analysis to show that like those 2 problems that we're recommending action on will fix over 60% of their issues, which is pretty big deal. If I remember correctly, like I said, this is the part of the process where they were really like kind of really paying attention to what we were giving them, because this is the stuff that's helpful for them. And it looks like from the analyze phase, now we're moving into the improve phase, and this is just where we highlight all those recommendations that we are giving to improve their process. It looks like we gave them 6 recommendations. If I remember, I won't go through each recommendation in detail because they're pretty in depth, but the majority of them work off that analysis that I was showing earlier. But, you know, looking back through this, and it looks like post those recommendations, like I said, that was just the improve phase. So we never really moved into the control phase. And that would just be how do we keep this working in perpetuity, or in continuity, I should say. So looking back through this presentation with y'all, I think that my team and I did very well in a lot of areas. We did very well on defining and measuring and analyzing our process. I think that it's a little disconjointed how we recommended, because just looking through the project and kind of remembering what it was like in the room, I can remember that the board of directors of Mission Lexington was kind of confused by our recommendations. And I remember thinking at the time, like, why are you confused? They're not that complicated. But breathing through them, it's kind of disjointed from the analysis we did. I think that if it would work in a little more connection with that analysis, it'd be kind of clear why you need to do these things instead of just saying, hey, we did this analysis, but here's our recommendations. Kind of being like, this analysis tells us that you need to do this recommendation, which I think we kind of failed to do, which makes sense for the way they reacted in the time. Um, and then, like I said, that we didn't really move into the control phase. Like, how do we keep this process continuing to get better and continuing to stay on track? Like, we kind of just gave them our recommendations and said thank you. But overall, I think my team and I did really well. There's some things looking back at it now as a senior and going through a few more of these process improvement projects that I would say that we did well, and a lot of things that I'd say we could improve upon, which kind of fits, because it's all about improving. And yeah, I think we did well, but I definitely do better if I did it today. But anyways, thank you for listening to me talk through this presentation. I hope that you found it enjoyable. And again, thank you for looking through my e-portfolio. Thanks.